everyone. I'm Gautam Vishwanathan, co-founder and head of product at Workato. Workato helps integrate applications and automate workflows. Prior to Workato, I was at TIBCO. I was there from the beginning to about 650 million in revenue. I was head of product at TIBCO. Bhavini?
Hi, I'm Bhavini Saneji, VP of Engineering at Headspace. And prior to that, I was CTO at Heal, driving product and technology. And prior to that, I was a product and technology leader at Snapchat and Microsoft. I'm very thrilled to be here and looking forward to sharing my experiences and learning from others. Over to you, Vijay.
All right, thank you. My resume is not as stellar as the above, but let's see what we can do. I'm Vijay Gill. I am product and engineering at Twilio on the accounts platform. Prior to that, I was head of engineering at Databricks, and before that, Salesforce, Microsoft Azure, and then Google in what is now Google Cloud Platform. Thank you. Excited to be here.
All right. Great to meet you, Bhavini, Vijay. With that, let's get started. I think the topic is how do you balance new product features and at the same time maintain quality. Maybe we'll get kicked off by hearing from both Bhavini and Vijay. What do you think is like the biggest source of friction between shipping product and at the same time maintaining a level of quality, stability, and reliability?
I think I can kind of start off. This is, I think, a favorite topic for us all, and it is always a journey. I think it boils down in a nutshell to speed of innovation. Let me simplify the world into two categories that constitute the roadmap. One is innovation, which is product features. And the second one is items driving the speed of innovation. Let's drill down a little bit into the second category, which constitutes the backbone of the innovation. And what constitutes here is how do you automate all the mundane, time-consuming manual workflows that your developers are consumed in by investing in releasing fast with quality, investing for fast detection and response. You don't want to fly blind. And investing on building some common reusable components. Once you have this, you're going to continuously refactor to ensure components are secure, scalable, and available with low latency. Think of it, it's no longer like those big enterprise times. It's more like car servicing. You have to do some light oil change or some invasive tune-ups. And that's the model that has come about in the product development. And what this amounts to is a flywheel which feeds in itself. Investing for speed of innovation leads to higher development velocity, which leads to improved product innovation and scaling the team, which will lead to investing more into the speed of innovation. And now that we've covered the second category of speed of innovation, let's go into the innovation category, which is the product features. Over here, there is no single way to drive this, but rather finding a flavor that works for your company. The things that worked for me are aligning to what is the customer impact, what is the business impact, what is the top line and bottom line for the business. And once we've defined this what, we can focus on the hows by checking what are the hypotheses and the data that will help us validate. And to just sum it up, the investment across both of these, innovation and speed of innovation, it's not a one size fits all. Each company needs to base investing in this depending on their maturity. Example, an early startup needs to create products and POCs instead of investing heavily in speed of innovation. Or on the other hand, a startup which is growing and focusing on the scale and growth needs to invest more because those are the things that are going to slow them down. I'll take a pause and would love to hear Vijay's thoughts on that before jumping into all the other frameworks that can be leveraged for this.
So as people know me, right, I normally tend to have fairly contrarian takes to common wisdom. So my contrarian take is that there's no fixed budget, right? Because depends on the stage of the company. There will always be more features, more go-to-market, more product features that customers want that you want to get launched, and quality by definition almost falls behind. The way I look at it is it's a pendulum. You build until stuff starts taking off, and then it starts falling apart, in which case then you stop building and you start focusing on getting stability into the system. What I've never found useful is trying to like overthink very long-term stability, because most of the time your product is going to be crap and it will fall over. So it doesn't really matter investing heavily in that. What I do invest heavily in is build, delivery, and testing systems, because those are the fundamental systems that enable iteration faster. So that's kind of like my main focus. In terms of time spent, typically it's not a fixed budget either. It's like when you're launching new stuff or there's some deadlines, most of the effort is towards features or getting fit and finish, and less time towards tech debt reduction, and then eventually you stabilize because of the pain. And the stakeholders is not just product and engineering. A lot part of the stakeholder is, at least for enterprise companies, is go-to-market. A go-to-market wants to hit quota. They want to promise stuff. We have to kind of work backwards into it. And the way I decide how to do it is who gets, if everybody is equally unhappy between product engineering and go-to-market, we've achieved a reasonable balance. And I want to maintain equal unhappiness going forward. That's typically how I approach it. I don't spend a lot of time around innovation velocity. What I do spend a lot of time around is the underlying fundamental systems to reduce the dev loop. Build, test, push to production. That's my like key metric, because I don't know what product is going to resonate, and neither does anybody else. So for me, multiple tries at target strictly dominates spending a lot of time trying to think what you're trying to land.
Got it. No, it's sort of very different input, and of course, so many factors go into this. One is, are you focused on consumers? Are you focused on enterprise? What is the stage that you are in terms of as a company? Are you early, mid? So if you release fast and you break something, what is the impact? That's really sort of interesting viewpoints. But at sort of like at the heart of this, though, I think sort of the question is, there's like execution focus and so on, but how do you sort of figure out that when you look at something that this is actually really important and needs to be built? Because oftentimes, whatever stage we are in, right, you're faced with multiple choices. You could do one of N. You have the capacity to do maybe two. What do you pick? And sort of how do you guys sort of go through that process of figuring out what is worth building?
So I can take a shot. How do we figure out what is worth building is... and this is really hard, right? Because really what matters is what is your prioritization framework? And so as a result, if the company has a good prioritization framework and a good set of values up front, you can then say, okay, well, these things are what we're going to build. And remember, if you have a good prioritization framework, it is going to be painful to make decisions. If there's no pain running decisions through a prioritization framework, you don't have a robust prioritization framework.
So Vijay, if I may, so what kind of prioritization framework do you guys use?
So for example, I'll pick a company. We have product X. For this year, because product X has high gross margin and has very high stickiness factor, the number one priority for us is to make sure that we use we go to market and we just focus on product X. The second one is customer trust, stability, so on and so forth. Third one is go to market for new regions. Using those frameworks, right? If we have to make a decision, should we work on stability, or should we work on expansion to a new region? Or should we work on making product X feature rich? We will pick product X feature rich as like our core alignment. The point I'm trying to get to here is that having these priorities up front prevents people from feeling that, hey, the company is arbitrarily making decisions, which leads to burnout. This way, you have a framework, you agree on the framework, then the decisions come out of that framework. So you can't argue the decisions. What you should argue is the data going into the framework and the framework itself. If you're aligned on those two things, then there's less burnout because people know why you are making those decisions, some of which are very stupidly painful.
Okay. So
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more on it. Right. I think the mistakes that I see people doing is when there is lack of alignment and prioritization, where during that alignment and prioritization discussion, it's only thought of one aspect. And that's not the only aspect, right? And how do you make sure that everything is laid out on the table so that when you're doing company strategy, planning, road mapping, you have things outlined that is critical to the company, whether it is feature, whether it is some tech debt that's slowing down the scale and meeting the ROI, or whether there is other efforts which are, allowing you to fly blind or not cater to the customer and business needs, and that time could have been automated. And I think this is super critical because that enables everyone to row in the same direction and know what is the bar that is set up. It's basically, you don't want surprises and you don't want this missed expectations. And in order for this to succeed is this measurements, right? What are the KPIs that you're measuring against, whether it is the ROI, whether it is driving engagement up for features and innovation, or whether it's measuring how many incidents are due to quality or how many incidents are discovered pre-release or post-release. And I think this is going to be such that this framework not only applies at that big bucket level at the company level, but each team has to be empowered to apply this framework, because they have to have that flexibility to know when they have to make some hard decisions to prioritize on the business, or as Vijay was saying, go to live or market trends, in which case some items might go below. But having items in the roadmap that helps people know what is the effort, what is the impact, what is the risk, makes it a transparent and informed decision making.
And Bhavani, just to sort of double click on that, what sort of, in a situation like that where product sort of feels very strongly about something, you in engineering, you're like not entirely sure, there's a set of other priorities, how sort of do you deal with situations like that?
I think it is a give and take, right? And this is where, in the end, we know what is the right things to go after. As long as you have the roadmap items, you're adjusting and you know when you have to fast follow. We have made decisions that in order to get to the customer, get to the speed, we have made compromises. But as long as those compromises are fast followed, then everyone knows. And when that fast follow doesn't happen, then you lose the credibility with the team. You start paying that price of maintaining overhead, etc. And that starts eating up. So how do you have that muscle on having the transparency and having the fast follow? The other thing is the alignment comes in place, right? Because sometimes when you want to get the feature out and you want to just test it, you don't want to put all the bells and whistles on it because you don't even know whether you're going to continue and have all customers adopt it. So for that, you just go light, like just the MVP concept that exists for features. Same thing exists for some of the quality gates. You make it very light, and once you have heat on it, and when you want to do a worldwide launch, then there is alignment across product and technology that, hey, we might need to take some time to be able to put some levers that helps us detect and support it well. And I think this is where the two people have this right alignment and give and take, then I think it goes a long way. There's no one solution. And it has to be not just at the top level. You have to empower this for each team, and that is where the measurement comes super critical. It's data driven, whether it's data driven for customer related features or it's data driven related to where you're investing to speed up the innovation.
Got it. So, I'll sort of share a little bit about sort of, at Workato. I mean, one of the things is, what sort of I've personally in my journey is that all of these things, I mean, you have to be deeply thoughtful on sort of like we're talking about two things, right? New features versus quality. Clearly, both are extremely important, right? It's not, you can't pick one. You have to pick both. And so what sort of, we have a very simple litmus test, if you will. I mean, the first thing is essentially what is the impact of it measured in t-shirt sizes, a small, medium, and so on. And then we sort of think about what is the effort level. And again, t-shirt sizes. And then the last one is urgency, because I mean, this really, I think, applies to fast-growing startups where there's so much to do. There is important, which is a much bigger bucket, and then there's urgent, and you're able to sort of, you can only do things that are important and urgent. So that's kind of like a simple thing that sort of, and also the other thing is, again, in a startup, you can't, or I think, it's more even broadly applicable. You can't spend too much time figuring out this, right? I mean, there has to be a bias to action. And then, as sort of Vijay, you pointed out, you don't know what is going to work. So sort of like the bias to action, build it out, look at the data, and then decide is also sort of like a really good sort of approach. And so switching, sort of continuing there from, maybe Vijay, you can talk about also how often sort of like you build something amazing and sort of, but the feedback or sort of the usage data or whatever the metric for measurement wasn't great. How sort of how do you sort of think about that, and like how do you handle that?
Well,
it does help with the equally unhappy part of it, but
right. No, I mean, a lot of people tend to think, hey, every product we build is great, and unfortunately, most products are crap, right? I mean, that's just almost by definition. If everything you built was great, you wouldn't have a 10-to-1 failure rate in startups. So by definition, almost everything is bad. So the question then is, okay, well, how do you make something slightly better? And all you need to do is, because everybody else is also bad, right? All you need to do is get slightly higher win rate than most of your competition and iterate over time. Right. So for me, what that really matters is you build something that you think actually solves problems, and people are willing to pay you for it. AKA, can you get champions behind it? And then you have to diagnose, why is it not resonating? Is it because the use case is too narrow and we have overfit the data? I've seen a lot of things where we overfit the data because we want to believe.
That's right. That's right.
So you don't want to overfit the data. You don't want to oversample friendly customers. What you want to oversample are people that dislike you and your product, and you want to figure out why, if they have the right pain point. So that's number one. Number two is you have to diagnose, is my product crappy, which probably is, and is my distribution crappy, which it probably is as well, right? So from there, you kind of work backwards. Hey, I think we have hit on something. And for the most part, you wouldn't have hit on something, but once in a while you do hit on something, and you diagnose, why is it not getting the expansion that it needs? You track things like land and expand ratios. You track things like usage. For me, usage and adoption are the only leading indicators that matter. If people are using your product bad as it is, and they continue to expand the usage, you've hit on something that solves a pain point. And then after that, it's a distribution problem, how to package, price, and distribute it so that people start picking up on it. Another challenging problem is that engineers tend to build product for engineers, which means that the barriers to adoption are high. So how do we reduce friction for adoption? That's another thing, AKA experiment to usage ratios are bad. A lot of people experiment with it and then give up on it. It means you can't actually take it to production well. Those are the kind of like key things I look at, and the framing is that almost everything is going to be bad. So you really need to oversample and find out where is it resonating. That means you've actually hit on something useful. And try to don't get too attached to the product, where you overinvest in what you want to succeed and it's just not resonating.
Bhavni, looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating when I see the cases that don't work is this shiny object syndrome. Like people just want to jump from one thing to the other. And the key is understanding what is that lever for customer impact, business impact, and understanding what is the questions that are going to help us validate this hypothesis that we have. What is the data we need to put in? There are so many cases where the feature is developed, but then it's not even looked at correctly. The next thing is jumped in. You'll never get it right in the first one. You have to fine tune it. The only time you'll be able to get the feature value is after one or two iterations. Once you understand, so many times we think, okay, this is how it's going to work and let's build it. But when you start seeing how it's adapted, how the customers are using, what is it addressing their pain points? Is it not? That one or two fine-tuned iterations is actually what helps us nail it down. And so many times I've seen people just, boom, do this, next one. You cannot do that. And as leaders, we have to give teams the time and space to have the swim lanes of different features where, yes, you might test out some new things, but you have to have the discipline to follow through and know what came out of it. And I think that, in my mind, is that framework and muscle that the team needs to build. And once you've done that, you can adopt that at different problems, different things, and they can now have the space to say no or take the time to understand and see.
All right. Maybe we'll sort of take some, see if there's any questions from the audience. And sort of, I don't know if there's any sort of thing that you folks see here that you want to respond to. But one of the things that sort of oftentimes, when you think about quality, and especially for platformy things, right? I mean, quality is sort of, much more than sort of a user experience and an interaction, but also can have long-term ramifications in the form of, let's say, especially around technical debt, around scaling, poor architecture choices. And Vijay, you kind of mentioned that. And I think I kind of sort of see that viewpoint where you maybe I heard it incorrectly, but the question mainly is like, how do you kind of optimize? It's hard to optimize for where you're going to be in terms of scaling requirements 3 years out, right? But at the same time, going in, that if I do this, there's a pretty good chance that 2 years down I may have to rewrite it. How do you sort of balance that? That's sort of, because that's one of the things that I actually sort of, it's one thing that it's very hard to compromise on, even though, you're not where you're going to be, but, architectural retrofit in like a system used by thousands of customers is sort of more challenging.
Oh boy, yes. So the first part is, do you have the system instrumented correctly so that you can see incipient signs of failure early? Especially most of my background is in large-scale distributed systems, and those systems tend to have non-linear effects, right? AKA the control regime goes non-linear very quickly, in the sense that the curve is almost discontinuous, right? You can track latency, throughput, up to a certain level. Once you hit that tipping point, the entire system goes non-linear into a different control regime and just kind of like goes kerblooey, right? So
Both
for
up,
me,
yeah.
yeah, so for me, the way I look at it is A, do you have the instrumentation in place? And B, do you have the testing harnesses in place? This is just purely what I would call the volumetrics of the product, aka QPS, queries per second, load, user requests, whatever figure of merit is the scaling point against that system. You make sure you instrument it, and then you pressure test it, right? At Google, we had this awesome thing called redlining, where basically you would just run a system till failure and you see which parts fell over first. So that's number one, which is the harness. The second one is go through your incident reports, all your postmortems, all your incident root cause analysis, and do a taxonomy on it and have somebody really good do them. I can almost guarantee you that there will be like 4 or 5 metrics in each product that give you the canary in a coal mine. Typically, it's database IOPS, memory pressure, CPU usage, network IOPS. Among those 4, you will pretty much see where the system is going to fall over. So the goal here is then you architect systems where those things are easy to switch out, and which is easy to say but much harder to do. But that's where
right.
That's why you have senior engineers do it and not somebody straight out of college trying to build large-scale distributed systems.
Yeah, no, I was actually, no, that makes sense. Where I was coming from is going in, oftentimes you have a sort of pretty good sense that if I choose this architectural approach, I know it's not going to scale beyond a certain point. And if I go with this, it is going to add a lot of time to delivering this sort of capability that is urgent and important. And you're kind of faced with this decision of like, I know this is not going to work in the long term. I know this one is going to get to where I need to get to very quickly. And then, or I live to fight another day, perhaps, you know. Yeah, maybe Bhavni, why don't you sort of, I think you.
It's an interesting aspect. I think there are 2 aspects to it. One is, how do you abstract out things like scalability, security, some of the infrastructure pieces, so that your feature development crew doesn't have to think about that, because that is now, you've just concentrated that on some key areas for putting some senior people on it and building it in a way that solves for all of your product teams. And I think that is super critical. Yes, maybe not all product teams might adopt and get in the same, but starting to have that, and again, this depends on the maturity of the team and the size and all, but how do you abstract those big pieces out such that there is more clear consistency, guidelines, and capabilities that your development teams can go about doing it? And I think the second point is the decision making across technologies, whether it's in this abstraction layer or whether it's in the product development teams. I think it is that whole decision, like there's a format that I have that we follow at our company with for RFCs and decision making, is you outline what are the options and what are the levers for decision making, right? And having that owner write that down helps people to make that informed decision and helps people get that input from others as to what to watch out, etc. And invariably, that data and that framework of everyone contributing and giving more light on it helps automatically for that owner to start seeing where things are tipping. And I think having that time and that forum is super important. I kind of call it as, before you go into the tech specs, doing a brainstorming session of just what are the options, right? You're not going to go deep, but just kind of clarifying that levers. Think of it as just as a product development. In the product development, you call out like the what. In these decision makings, you have to call out that what. And many times people just jump into it. I'm like, you do not refactor or tell, I want to go with this shiny technology just for the heck of it. You have to be able to quantify the whys or what is it going to solve or impact. And I think having that space for people to do it and for others to contribute goes a long way.
I think we're nearly out of time. And there is a question, but probably not enough time to respond. Any sort of last seconds thoughts, Vijay? I think I felt that you wanted to say something.
No, this has just been a pleasure. And if there are any questions that weren't answered in the Q&A, feel free to directly ping me on LinkedIn. We'll try to get to them.
Same here. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Gautam and Vijay. It was great talking to you guys and learning from you.
Thank you.